Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Let's Talk About Health. My name is Madeline Mant, and I am so delighted today to introduce our special guest, Susan Kisilevich, who will talk to us today about her work as an occupational therapist. So welcome to the show, Susan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me, Maddie.
We're so happy to have you here. This particular field has been a big request from a lot of my students wanting to know more about occupational therapy. So you're here now, so we've got you. Can you tell us, what is an occupational therapist?
Absolutely. That is the question that I get all the time. Usually when we're talking to people, it's like, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I'm an occupational therapist, an OT. And people are like, oh, so you do work-related stuff because it's all return to work. And you're like, no, we're so much more than that. So I'm going to begin by saying, I love OT.
I love OT.
So basically what we do is we empower and enable people of all ages and to kind of push through their limitations in their daily lives so that they can do more and live better. The one thing that we always ask, and I'm going to actually do a quote from one of my favorite quotes for occupational therapy. An occupational therapy practitioner asks, what matters to you, not what's the matter with you? And that's quoted from Dr. Virginia Argini Stoffel. She's an associate professor, former American Occupational Therapy Association president at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. So I thought it was just a great quote. So yeah, we are really focused on what people need and want to do. And when there's things that pop up in life, whether it's illness, whether it's disability, we look at the whole person. We don't take a fix-it approach like, okay, I've got a sore elbow, I've fractured an ankle. We don't just look at the ankle or the elbow. We look at the entire person. We look at the physical, the mental, the cognition, even the spiritual. And we look at some really basic things like bathing, so activities of daily living. So, if you're having limitations with bathing, well, what can we do as an occupational therapy to help you bathe? We look at eating, grooming, we look at cooking, driving, we look at leisure activities. We are all encompassing. I have to say, I just love my profession. I'm actually a fairly new grad. I graduated in 2018, so a few years ago, but it took me a long time to get to where I was. And that's not just because of the educational component, but just really finding out who I was as a person. And we can talk about that later. But that, in a nutshell, is what OTs do. Our practice settings are very diverse. We work with peds, so in schools. We work in long-term care. We work in hospitals. We're in community, private practice, mental health, research, health promotion, advocacy, teaching, health promotion, and also wellness.
Amazing. Well, you've led us perfectly to the next question I wanted to ask you, and there's so many I want to ask you, which is about some of that use of language. And so we talk in our class about terms like health and illness and wellness and sickness and how complicated some of these definitions could be. So I wanted to put it to you, how are you using terms like that in your occupational therapy work?
Yes. So wellness, I think maybe what I'll do is I'll back up a little bit and just talk about the profession and how it was born. So it was around 1917, and it was the same year where the U.S. kind of entered World War I. And there was this sudden need for rehabilitation of sending soldiers back to the front lines. And so there was physical injuries, but also shell shock. So a lot of, and I think a lot of our mental health kind of standpoint comes from those early beginnings. And so it was kind of formed under this kind of like physical, medical, mental health umbrella. And so actually with the U of T, that actually started the first occupational therapy department way back when. It was around 19, I'd have to look it up, but I think it was around 1918, somewhere around there, but you can double check that. But, and then it kind of moved across Canada from there, is if we're given collaboration, if we're given dialogue, if we're given tools, perhaps, we can all overcome small, large obstacles in our lives. And so wellness from that perspective encompasses all of that. So the mental health aspect, the physical, the spiritual, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hearing holism in there. Like there's a holistic.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of collaboration as well. Like we don't, for wellness for me, I mean, wellness is I'm going to propose is very individualistic, because my sense of wellness is not going to be what my client's sense of wellness is. And so it's very important that we're, as a therapist, that we listen to our clients, because for say someone that rides a motorcycle, their sense of wellness is I need to be on the bike. I need to have the wind flowing through my hair. I need to feel the vibration of the bike, and I just need to have that freedom. Maybe that's their ideal of wellness. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to think about balance because he needs to get on the bike, or she, or whoever. They need to have good grip strength to be able to do the throttles. They need to be able to put their foot firmly on the brake. They need to have the cognition to be able to look at the lights that are coming forward, stopping, slowing down, all those things. So that's where I'm coming at from an OT perspective, relating to them on their wellness level.
Right. Very much more than the sum of our parts is what I'm hearing here. But I love thinking about breaking down those problems. Can I ask you about the poster you have behind you? I've been looking at it this week. I've been wondering, because I'm wondering a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like. So I'm hearing that you're working with individuals. I'm also seeing, is that Aquasize back there?
Yeah. So I'm quite a unique OT. So I work in long-term care full time. So my Monday to Friday kind of regular job is long-term care, and that's very taxing. We're dealing with palliative folks. So, on a daily basis, we have folks that are end of life and passing. And that can be really tough for my wellness. So what I do is for my wellness, I'm in the water. So my motto is wellness through water. And as soon as I immerse myself in the water, with whether it's for myself or with my client, I just get that sense of that calm, that ebb and flow. And so from an occupational therapy standpoint, because I always have that hat on. If any of you decide to go into OT, you can't shut it off. It's always there. And so one of the models that we, in occupational therapy, we use a lot of models. And one of the ones that really resonated for me from a wellness standpoint is the CAWA model. And it's spelled KAWA. It's an infusion of Japanese. There's a little bit of Canadianism in there as well. But it talks about like the flow, the ebb and flow of life, right? So we have this river. And when we're feeling good, things are rocking and rolling, things are smooth sailing. But as soon as we can come across a physical or a mental block or limitation, it's almost like driftwood or rocks that kind of stop that ebb and flow. So whenever I think of wellness, I think of those models that kind of help me kind of regain my inner strength so that I'm able to continue to provide, good, like wonderful services, right? To have that, I guess that calm. So my private practice is in aquatics. So I do aquatic rehab, I do parent taught, I teach group, pretty much everything, including personal training in the water. And so it's twofold for me. I have the private practice part, but I also have the day-to-day stuff, which basically sustains me. And I have to say, if anyone decides to go into OT private practice, they really need to look at the financial stability of it. And this is just as an aside, for me, in this particular instance, the long-term care is what sustains me and allows me to do the private practice, which is not a sustainable form of income for me. I do it for my own wellness and hopefully for those that I meet and interact with.
Absolutely. Well, I super appreciate you bringing in concepts of finance and also concepts of care for oneself, because these are issues that I think sometimes we don't foreground in some of the discussions of health or health careers, and it's such an important aspect of that. But again, you've led me really cleanly into the final question I wanted to ask you today, which is about how would one become an occupational therapist? Because it sure sounds like there's a lot of different potential entry points and in terms of interest, and a lot of different places people might end up being. But how do we get there?
Yes, yes. So it is a highly competitive field. It is a master's level program. So you would have to apply to a university that offers. Here in Alberta, it's the University of Alberta. The entry is usually about 100 to 120 students per year. And the criteria you could just go to the website. But in order to kind of give you maybe a really good chance, because it is also based a little bit on a lottery system, a lot of folks end up doing like a kinesiology undergrad kind of thing in the sciences. But that's not the only thing, because occupational therapy is so diverse. You could look at a Bachelor of Arts with psychology. My pre-OT days, I have a master's in the arts and sociology. So I came at it from a very grand perspective. There's volunteerism that would be really useful. If I was to do it over again, I would probably look at getting the education to become an occupational therapy assistant. Now there's kind of like a grouping where it's PTOT. It's a PTA OTA. So you could be a physical therapy assistant, occupational therapy assistant, and that would give you a super idea of what an OT would look like, because basically it's an OT supervising the OTA, saying, okay, we need this wheelchair fixed. Can you go do it? So that you get the hands-on stuff. So it really gives you an idea of what potentially the career looks like. But honestly, there's so many different avenues that you could take to get there. But certainly having the psychology, sociology, the kinesiology, those types of background as far as the education goes. And then if you can't get into any of that, there's also other ways that you could look at. So volunteering, right? So, if you're looking at long-term care, for example, volunteer at a long-term care facility. If you're looking at hospitals, look at what opportunities are there and have a really good cover letter.
That's such good advice. I'm so thankful that we were able to get you here today to talk about this. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing your time today and sharing your expertise with us. And say, of course, thank you to everybody in the audience for tuning in. And we will see you next time on Let's Talk About Health.